When talking about the online registration, we also talk about online payment. And we as Registrar, we also offer some payment methods to collect entry fees from the participants. This is mainly or only being used in Europe. I think in the US it's also possible, but it's not that common, I would say, but still it would be possible. Then there are a couple of DIY payment methods. So you could, for example, connect to your PayPal account, to your PayPal business account. That's necessary to know. There are a few other payment methods that you can make use of. The fees that are, or the entry fees that are collected during or with the online payment, they are all defined in main window entry fees, and that's what we'll look at in a minute. And then I will also talk about the vouchers. When talking about entry fees, we can differentiate entry fees between basic fees that apply to everyone. We have optional fees that apply to certain participants only. For example, those that buy a t-shirt, of course, only those need to pay the $5 for the t-shirt. And then there is advanced options, for example, a donation where the participant decides how much he wants to pay. And we will cover all that in our event file that we set up last week, if you remember. Or actually that we looked at last week because we didn't really set it up, but I went through the file with you. Let's have a first look at the online payment section under myresult.com. So if you want to use the online payment, you need to activate online payment, then you can tick a box depending on which payment you want to have or want to offer the participant. These ones you also see the fees that apply to the payment. To each payment is a framework contract that you need to sign that holds all rights and duties. And then there's other payment methods or DIY payment processing, which is basically collecting data or forwarding to your own account. They are free except for the last one, for your own QPay account. But yeah, if you want to know more about it, then please send a message. Please put a message in the chat or get in touch with our team, and then we're happy to help. But now looking at the entry fees. So we will go to main window entry fees, and that's where you define all your entry fees. I hope the screen is large enough for everyone to read everything. If not, please let me know. So the entry fees can be set up for each contest separately. So you see we have a marathon. Let's call it, we have a box for marathon, we have a box for half marathon, one for marathon relay, and one for half marathon relay. And then we also have a box for all contests. Entry fees that apply to everyone, no matter which contest they are registered for, they will be put under all contests. Apparently, all entry fees that apply only to someone registered for the marathon, for example, will be created here under the marathon. The structure of the entry fees is the same for all entry fees, no matter what kind of entry fee they are. So you always put a name or a keyword for the entry fee, and this keyword will also be shown on myresult.com in the payment overview. And also in Result 12 later on if you want to check payments from participants. You define the amount of that certain entry fee. You define whether it is a fixed amount or if it's a percentage. And if you have positive percentage, that will be a surcharge. A negative percentage will be a discount. With the discounts, it is important, or the position of the entry fee, the sorting is very important. If you have an entry fee, let's simply call it discount. And we say this discount is 10%. Of course, that also applies to surcharges. If you have a percentual surcharge or discount, it will always apply to all entry fees above this entry fee. So here the discount would apply to the entry fees, so early bird, or at the moment we are in April. So let's say you would pay 38 euros. And our discount would be calculated on the 38 euros. So we would pay 34.20. And then if we buy or if we donate something, then we would pay the full amount on the donation. If, however, our percentage is all the way at the bottom, then it will apply to all entry fees above. So all entry fees. So the group registration discount is 10% on all entry fees, because there's nothing underneath except the lucky pick, which we will look at in a bit. The born between and the registered between is quite obvious, I would say. And for born between, or for both options, it is recommended, or we recommend that you use the 1st of January 1900 if there's no start date, and the 31st of December 2100 for the end date, kind of. So especially for registered between, that means the first entry fee, so the early bird rate, will start at 1st of January 1900 and will last until the 31st of March 2021. And the last entry fee lasts until 31st of December 2100. Apart from that, I think that is obvious. Now we have a filter. The filter, if you keep or if you leave that empty, that entry fee will apply to everyone. Here it will apply to everyone who has registered before end of March and is registered for the marathon. If you would have an entry fee down here, it would apply to all participants because it's under all contests. In the filter, you can then also define who should pay this entry fee. So whom does it apply to? And here we will look at the BIP selection. If you remember last week, we set up an additional field called pref BIP, where we ask the participant if he or she wants to select his or her own BIP number. That was a checkbox field. So we say pref BIP equals 1. If that filter or if that condition is met, then the €2 fee will be applied. If pref BIP equals 0, so if a participant does not want to select his or her own BIP, then of course nothing would be applied, nothing would be charged. That's it for the filters. Well, what if you have two conditions that need to be met? The easiest way if you have two conditions is to use an if function. And we will look next week into functions, fields, formulas, user-defined fields, and all that. But I guess you more or less all know an if-else function. So if pref BIP equals 1 and write BIP 3, which means the 3 numbers on the right of the BIP equal 111. So if both conditions are met, return 1, otherwise return 0. And if that if function equals 1, so if both conditions are met, we will have a lucky pick presented by race result, which would be a 100% discount, which would be a free entry. If that function returns 0, because either pref BIP is 0 or the participant does not have a BIP with 111 at the end, 0 equals 1 is a wrong statement, so it would not apply this 100% discount. Let's now have a look at the advanced options or further options. Let's start with the category. The category is necessary for the vouchers. Maybe not necessary, but helpful for the vouchers, because you can define different categories. And for example, a voucher, some vouchers should only apply to the real entry fee, but not to a gimmick, not to the donation, obviously. And the category you define on your own. So you simply enter a text. And of course, it is necessary that you don't have any typos in there. As soon as you have one entry fee with a category gimmick and one with gimmick with just one M, then you actually have two different categories. two different and independent categories. So in our example, we have the category gimmick for the BIP selection, for the donation, and for all regular entry fees, we have the category entry. Oops. Then let's look at the multiply with optional. We have a donation set up with €1, but we want the participant to define how much he wants to donate. So we have the donation additional field, which is a currency field, and the participant can enter any value from 0 to whatever he wants to donate. And then this is a value, and this will be multiplied with 1. So if I enter €5 as a donation, then it will multiply 5 with 1, which results in 5. If I don't enter anything, donation will be 0. 0 multiplied with 1 equals 0. And an entry fee that is 0, that is empty, will not be shown anywhere. Now we have the tax options, especially for larger companies that need to put the tax on there. You can either include the tax or add the tax. And if your tax number is not on the list, then drop us an email and let us know so we can add the tax value into this list. Last but not least, show as basic fee. There is two things related to the basic fee. First of all, there is a standard field called basic fee and entry fee. And all entry fees that do not have a filter are treated as a basic fee. But as soon as you have a filter in here, you can also say that it is a basic fee once you tick that box. So sometimes you have a mandatory chip rental, for example. So that could be separate on the invoice or on the payment overview if it's not included in the regular entry fee, or if it's a deposit, for example. And then you could show it as a basic fee because participants are or they need to pay this. And then it will also not only show in the standard fields, but it will also show on the event side. It will be included in the entry fee that is shown here. And that was it on entry fees. I don't see any questions, so I will go directly to the vouchers. Vouchers, they always have a code. Of course, a voucher cannot have no code, and you define the code. The code can consist of, or it needs to be an alphanumeric code, so no special characters. Then you can define a percentage or a fixed amount, or you can also define the price of the first registration period or the price of the previous registration period. And the first registration period is always the period that starts on 1st of January 1900. Otherwise, the software cannot know or does not know which is the first, which is the first period. And the price of the previous registration period, that is quite obvious. Then the tax, similar to the entry fee itself. For the contest, you can define a voucher for a single contest or for all contests. It is not possible to have a contest in this example for a marathon and half marathon, but not for the relays. So either all or a single one. And now we have the categories affected. So I told you we have the category entry, we have the category gimmick, and we can also have an entry and gimmick. Why do we have entry and gimmick? It's the same as all. Let's quickly add something or simply change it and say, okay, I have enter. So assume we have a third category. And now I can have either of the three categories, but I can also have either combination of two of those three categories or have all. So that works with up to 3 different categories that you can have the different combinations. Let's revert the change and take a look at valid from and valid until. Obvious, for example, if you have a marketing campaign, you can easily say from when until when a voucher should be valid. Here again, the time zone matters. If you remember last time or last week, I told you the time zone is important for the online registration. Times usable, you can set the number of times a voucher can be used, either unlimited or 1 and then up to 100 in steps of 1, and then we have larger steps. Or you can also define it as one group registration. Why do we have it separate? In a group registration, it can happen, or in general, in a group registration, you could ask for the voucher once for the whole group registration. But then still you could ask, or you could write the voucher code into every single participant or only into one participant. But you could also ask for the voucher code for every single participant. And sometimes you want to allow a group to register with the same voucher code. So assume you have a group of 5, but you set the times usable to 1. Then you would receive an error for the second data set for the second participant, because the first one uses this voucher and is only allowed to be used once. So if you have a group registration, make sure to use the one group registration, or if you want to limit it to 1. The times used, obvious, and the remark, obvious as well. The last thing, if you don't want to spend time on thinking about a good code for a voucher, or if you need to create quite a few, you simply give the number of vouchers that you want to apply. From experience, I wouldn't put more than 1,000 in here, because then it will take time and take too much time. But I tried it with 1,000 and that worked quite well. The rest is the same settings that we just talked about. And then you can also optionally define a prefix that will be put in front of every single voucher. I did this morning with the first English session. I added a GRP for group, for the one group registration. And then I did automatically create, I think, 10 voucher codes. That's it on setting up entry fees and setting up vouchers. I don't see any questions so far, so let's proceed. Now we want to look at the general structure of the online registration. So we first of all have a landing page or info page. Then we have a page with form fields where the participant can enter his data, where you define what data to ask for. Then there's an optional check page. You can decide whether to show the check page or not, or hide it. Then there's an optional payment page. The payment page is shown if you ask for online payment and if the amount is larger than 0. If you enable online payment, but the amount to be paid is 0, then of course the payment page will be hidden and you will jump right to the confirmation page. How does it look? How does it look like? So here, this is our test event for today. This is the landing page, or this is what I call landing page. You have a description, or you can enter a description here. Then you have a list of contests, and you have different buttons for different contests. When you go into any of those contests, you will be on the form fields page. So you can enter data. Let's autofill some data. Oh, I need to put in a club. Now I am on the check page. You can also read where I am. And here you have rules of participation that you can define. This is simply the default German text. In English, that's slightly different, but anyway, you should check and confirm that this is all correct. You can also define up to 3 different additional terms. Then you have an overview of the entries that you just put in. If you hit change data, then you will jump back to to the form fields page, and you have an overview of the entry fees. And this one is the description or the name of an entry fee that we just defined in the main window entry fee settings. When I proceed, I need to accept the terms, and I will land on the payment methods page. I can choose a payment method. Depending on which one you have, you will be either forwarded to the payment provider, or here I ask for SEPA direct debit, which is a common payment in Europe at least, and I can enter my bank details, and then I could register, and then I would land on the confirmation page. We will look at how to set up more than 2 registration buttons on the landing page in a bit. So yeah, stay tuned and give me, let's say, maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Let's go top to bottom. So we start with the general structure with the landing page. Oh, so under myresisart.com online registration, we have the basic settings. First of all, you need to activate your online registration. In order to show the online registration, in order to enable your site in our registration and results platform, first of all, need to activate myresisart.com, which you do here under activate myresisart.com. You publish the event on myresisart.com, and ideally you show the event in the event calendar. The event calendar is a public event calendar where you can search for an event. This one is hidden because it's simply a training event. And then we ask you to fill the contact information, because on a daily basis, we receive emails from customers that ask for advice, that ask for changes to be made, whatever they ask for something concerning your event maybe. And all we can do is tell them, hey, go to myresisart.com and search for your event, and then contact the email that is shown in the footer. So please make sure that you fill at least one email address of the organizer or timer, so participants can contact you, because even if we could do the change in your database, we will not do it. So we will always refer to myresisart.com and ask the participant to contact you right away. Then looking at the basic settings, again, available from, available until, straightforward. The test registration becomes active as soon as you activate the online registration. And if you hit the button, you will always see a big red bar indicating the test mode. Actually, this is now German, but we can easily switch to English. So you will always see the test mode. In the test mode, you can test the registration even though the registration period did not start yet or has ended already. And payments will be authorized but not captured, so you don't need to pay anything for your test registrations, at least no payment fees or online payment. Payments will be authorized, so they can show on your credit card account, but they will not be captured. For the online registration mode, you can either have a single and a group registration. You can have only single or only group registration, or you can have a contest dependent registration. Actually, I just said you need to wait 15 minutes. I think we're a bit quicker than that. If you have a contest dependent registration, you will have at least one button for each contest. But then you can have single registration and group registration for each single contest. So that might make sense sometimes, it doesn't, but you can always limit that to only single registration for certain contests or only group registration. We will stick to the single and group registration now, and change the marathon relay to a special registration single and the half marathon relay to a special registration group, because the marathon relay in this example is set up as one data set. So one participant that contains all data for the second and third runner. And the half marathon relay contains of 4 individual runners, 4 individual participants in our database. So that's why we have a group with minimum 4 and maximum 4 registrations. And that way we will have a single and group registration for marathon and half marathon. We will have a special registration, a special single registration for the marathon relay, and a special group registration for the half marathon relay. And as soon as you have a special registration, you will then, similar to the contest-dependent registration, have your own button for this event. So that's why we have a marathon relay button, we have a half marathon relay button, we have a marathon and half marathon single registration button, and we have a marathon and half marathon group entry button. I hope that got clear how I set up more than 2 registration buttons. Unfortunately, the order of the buttons cannot be changed. The only way to change the order is to change the order of contests on the main window. Contests, you can drag drop them to the right order. The contest ID in this case does not matter. But a regular single and a regular group registration will always be shown on the bottom. So you will always have contest dependent or special registrations on top, and then the regular single and or group registration. For a group registration, this is also important. You can either have that as a list or as a table. If you have that as a table, data will be asked for like in an Excel spreadsheet. That allows you a good overview as long as you don't have too much data you ask for. If you have, let's say, 5 or more data fields, then I would recommend adding the group registration as a table. Sorry, as a list. So then they will show underneath. So we have the first registration, and you have the second registration, and you have the third registration. For the maximum number of participants, you can define that per contest or overall. But it is not possible to say, I want to have a maximum number of participants for marathon and half marathon, altogether 200. That would not work. And if you have the maximum number of participants per contest, it will also show you how many slots are available. But you can hide that as well if you don't want that. Then we will look at the landing page. The info text, this is what you see here. This is a simple HTML editor. So you can type in there whatever you want to. You can have a full description of the race, of the registration process, of whatever. Really up to you. Then you can also have an info text after the closing date. And here it is important to know that this info text will only show after the end of the online registration, but before event day. So the event day is set to tomorrow. And I will now change the available until date of the online registration to this morning. 10.5 hours ago, 9.5 hours ago. And now I will see this info text after end of online registration before event day. And I see the online registration is closed. I cannot select any of those buttons. If I change the event day to today, so assuming online registration ends in the morning and races in the evening, then the registration page will be gone. So I will revert that and revert that. And there we go again with our registration. You can also define an info text before the opening date. For example, if you say, yeah, this is our registration process and the registration will open on 1st of May, then put it in there. So everyone who accesses your event site will see that already. How did I get the marathon and half marathon single reg and group entry button? I simply renamed those buttons that are by default called single registration and group registration to make sure in this example that people know, okay, this is the marathon relay, this is the half marathon relay, this is any of the individual races. Then we have the check page as outlined before. This is the rules of participation or the terms and conditions. So please make sure that this is correct. You can have that in different languages as well as for actually everything here. But yeah, this, if you don't have any additional condition, by registering, people will accept the terms and conditions without the need to tick a box. With the additional conditions, they need to tick an additional box. So these are HTML lines, and you can use any HTML tag. So you could, for example, have your waiver linked here, so people can click on the waiver and bring that to the race, whatever they need to do. So that would be an option. And they need to tick the box, I consent to whatever. You can have up to 3 different conditions. As that question sometimes arises, it is nowhere in the software saved if someone ticked those 3 boxes. But if you don't tick them, you cannot register. And then we have the confirmation page at the very end of your registration, where you can show a thank you message or whatever. And you see this is not an HTML editor. If you apply this message or this code in front of the source code, anywhere in the software where you have an HTML editor, it will stick to the text editor. And then you can enter your plain HTML in here, because sometimes it happens that you have an HTML code and you enter it to the HTML editor, and then it breaks everything. It breaks the formatting and whatsoever. With this, you will stick to the text editor and you can write your plain HTML here. We will record the session and we will upload it. So you can review everything here. If you wonder about that code, we will also share this event file in the knowledge base. But I will tell you about it at the end of this session. One thing that has changed within the last 12 months, I think, or that is definitely not an old function. On the confirmation page, you can call fields. So you can, for example, say, thank you very much for registering, John. You will receive bit number 15,508. See you soon. If you have a group registration, this will always refer to the first data set or the first participant in your group registration. So in a group registration, this could be difficult. So be cautious what you show here. But if you only have a single registration, that would work. Of course, you can also link any pictures and everything, marketing, to make that look a bit better. In general, to make the online registration look nicer, you can enter additional CSS code. We will not look into this right now because that could fill 2, 3, 5, 10 sessions if we would look at CSS. So if you want to make your registration page look a bit nicer, then the only thing I can tell you is go and learn CSS, and then pretty easily you will be able to adapt the styling of your registration. We covered the online payment. We will look at the email confirmation once we have defined our form fields. So from the general structure of our online registration, the only thing that's missing now is the form fields. So what will I ask the participant to fill? What data do I need? So basically all this. And let's look at the setup of a line here. So each line stands for a line in here, and that could be either information like simply a fixed text, that could be a field or question for a field asking for information, that could be a picture, it could be a selection option. That was it. So you choose the field here. We have a few different options that we will look on their own in a bit, but then you have, beginning with title, first name, last name, you have default fields, and then you will also have additional fields that we set up. You can then define a label that is optional. If you don't fill the label for a field, then it will use the default field description. If you use an additional field, then it will use by default the description that you defined in the additional fields. So here we have a field, a checkbox field for pref_bib, which asks if someone wants to have a preferred bib number. So here it would show the label preferred bib number if you would leave that empty. Then we have a few different mandatory options. So is this field mandatory, yes or no, or is it only mandatory in a single or a group registration? Don't ask me for an example, or we have the latter two, but there are some. But again, please don't ask me. The common in the group registration is a bit more complex, but also easy to understand. So a field that is not common in the group registration means that this will be shown for every single participant. So if you enter 3 participants, this field will be shown 3 times. If it's information like please choose a contest, it will be shown 3 times. If it's a data field like the contest, it will be asked for 3 times. If it is common in the group registration, it will only be asked for once and then saved for all participants the same. So for example, the club, if you ask the club one time, common in group registration, and then you enter race result, then all participants of that group registration will have the club race result. And in general, all common fields of the group registration will show on top. Then you have all fields that are not common in the group registration. And then at the very end, you have fields that are that you chose yes, but at the end of the entry form. You can also say yes, but save only for the first registration, or the combination of the last 2. And then you can also define to show a field every 2nd, 3rd, 4th, up to 10th line. And that basically means show it after every 2nd participant. So if you have 6 participants, it will show it 3 times. Once at the very after the 2nd, after the 4th, after the 6th. Here for the show options, you can always show a field, but that always does not mean it will really always show, because there's some more options that we will look at in a bit. You can either show it in a single or a group registration, or show it never, and never actually sometimes makes sense. We will later have an example with a t-shirt where you can choose a t-shirt size, and I can prepare the message. Unfortunately, all shirts in size extra large are taken already, but at the moment people can still get a extra large t-shirt, so I will put that to show never. But I know that at one point I need to change it because people can no longer order t-shirts in extra large. But I have that prepared, and then the only thing I need to do is change that selection option. And then I can also select a contest, but only a contest that uses a contest-dependent registration or the special registration. So that's why I can choose the relay contests, but not the individual contests from this dropdown. This is the same for every single field. And now let's have a look at the extended settings, some more details for a field. First of all, formatting, straightforward. A validation rule and validation error message. We will look at that in the t-shirt example in a bit, but let's go through the list here first. We will have different special functions that you can choose from depending on what you need. Again, we will look at the special functions with examples. The uniqueness, you can say whether a field or actually the content of that field should be unique or not. You can say not unique, so everyone can have the same value in that field. You can have it unique per group registration. So for example, a club or a team, let's call it a team name in a relay. So you only want to have one team, or you can only have the same team name once. But as you have that as a group registration, everyone in this group registration should be able to have the same team name. You can have it unique per contest. It could work, for example, if you have the relay, but you save the team, or you only have one participant, and you save data for the second and third runner in additional fields. Then you could say unique per contest, or you could also say globally unique. Then you have a default value that, of course, here does not make sense, but let's have a look at the contest, for example. The default value, okay, with contest, not the best example. Let's have last name. You have a default value. The default value, if you set that, if the participant does not override it, the default value will be saved in the participant data. The placeholder instead will only show gray, and it will not be saved unless overwritten. And the placeholder that you can also define in the additional field settings in the main window, they will also be used for the placeholder in the online registration. And the placeholder only works for text fields, for open text fields. For checkbox fields, like the prefbib, you have the default value. You could say 0 or 1 by default. And then you also have a text that shows right beside the checkbox. So here, yes, I want to choose my bib number for €2. So you see this will be shown to the right of the checkbox. For fields with a selection option, so for drop-down fields like the t-shirt, let's ignore the validation rule for now. You have the default value, but you can also show deviating selection values. By default, this is empty because by default, it will use the selection values that you defined under main window additional fields. But sometimes it makes sense that you offer deviating selection values. I will put SML and extra large to take the example from a minute ago. I have t-shirts and I want to prepare everything as much as possible. So I only need to change as little as possible once extra large is booked out or extra large is taken. So I enter the deviating selection values already. And once extra large is no longer available, I could simply delete extra large. And now I would only have small, medium, and large. And no one could choose extra large any longer. As I will use this example for the validation rule, I will keep extra large here for the moment. So these were the different default value and different settings for different field types. What is then again similar for all fields is the show only if and if simultaneously. So here you can call a field. So you can set your filter when you want to show a certain field. So for example, the t-shirt, we only want to show if the contest, in this case, the contest ID, is smaller than marathon relay. Marathon relay has the contest ID 4. So the t-shirt will be, the t-shirt field will be shown for all participants that register for a contest 1, 2, or 3. In this case, marathon or half marathon. You can combine that with a second filter or a second condition that needs to be met in order to show this field. And here it is important to know that if you add a condition here, that field that you call needs to be part of your form fields. Otherwise, the check cannot work or does not work. So if you want to show this one only for individual contests, and if the license would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then you need to ask for the license somewhere else here. Even though you might have said, or maybe license is not the best example, but you could have an additional field. Let's say, let's say pasta. And by default, pasta is vegetarian. So even if it could happen that you only have the vegetarian option from last year, for example, and you delete the pasta field from the form fields, then this check would not work. So it really only works if you ask for that field in your form fields. I'll leave that as it was for now. Then the show only, depending on the date span, is obvious. And the check page, you can either show a field on the check page, no matter the content. You can hide it, no matter the content, or only show it if a value has been entered. So if it is empty or 0, then it will not be shown on the check page to keep the check page as short and concise as possible. So these are the additional settings, the extended settings for the different form fields. But we haven't looked at everything when looking at the form fields. We looked at the label, we looked at the mandatory settings, we looked at the common and group registration, we looked at the show options, we looked at extended settings, but we didn't look at those 5 special types of fields. So let's do that now. And let's start here at the bottom, at the top. Here we have a separated text white that says, please choose a contest. The separated text white means that it uses the full width and it is aligned to the left. If you have that narrow, then the background will use the full width, but the text will be aligned in order with the data fields here. If you leave that empty, of course, it will be a separator. So you have a blank line. For the separated text narrow, you will have those 3 dashes. And the separated text on check page, it will not show on the form fields, but as the name says, it will only show on the check page. So let's have an example. We want to show check on the check page. As this one is the first one, this is not a data field, so this will not show on the check page, but this is the first thing on the check page. I will refresh that page here. I will create some random data. Okay, I will select the club. And here on the check page, we see the check on top. So that allows you to give some structure to the check page. What's next? Next, we have the picture. The picture you can either, the picture needs to be under pictures and files in main window. And then by calling the file name, in this case, shirt.jpg, I can call a picture, shirt.jpg, and now I will call that picture. Here it will always, by default, be aligned in the center, and it will show in the full size. So if you have a picture, let's say 3 megabytes big, or 3 megabytes heavy, and the resolution is 1000 pixels by 1000 pixels, then you would have a large picture in here. So please make sure when having pictures that you reduce the resolution. And if you want to show several pictures in the same line, please create one file out of it in any program. But it's not possible to show 2, 3, 4 different pictures in the same line. The next option here is the pick box. The pick box, where you could call it picture box, is what we have here with the personnel data, for example. So this will add a a line around it, so it stands out a bit. You first enter pick box start or choose pick box start, and then of course you also need to have a pick box end to close that box. And within your pick box start, here with the personnel data, we use an HTML line, and that shows perfectly what an HTML line is, an HTML line. So you can use HTML tags. You can use that for further designing it with CSS. You can define classes and whatsoever. So this is the HTML line. We will now, I'm not an HTML expert, but at least that works. We will center that. And now we would have the personnel data here centered. So the pick box, the first line after pick box start, can be used as a header. Then I use a picture, and within a pick box, a picture will always be aligned to the left, and you will have the information or the form fields on the right of that table, or in the middle of the table, and you will have the picture on the left. And here the picture will be shrinked to fit the screen here, to fit the left side of the table. But still, we recommend to have a good resolution. So here, pick box start, HTML line, that could of course also be a separator, picture, and then we have the last name, first name, and so on. If you have the picture somewhere further down, it will not be aligned to the top of that box, but it will be aligned to the field that is above the picture. So here, year of birth, we would have, or we have it aligned on top of the year of birth, or to the top of year of birth. So let's revert that. Okay, pick box end, of course, that closes it. HTML line, we talked about that, and a JavaScript. There you can call or enter JavaScript functions, but please be aware that those functions might stop from one day to the other if we do any changes to the software. So if you know how to deal with JavaScript, then you can enter your functions here. But as said, they sometimes do not work 100% reliable. So that was it on the, let's call it special fields here. And look at some further extended settings like the validation rule. As said, we will look at the t-shirt example. The t-shirt here. The t-shirt asks for the size of the t-shirt. So we will look here. No, it's the wrong t-shirt. This is a free event shirt. So you can choose a size. Small, medium, large, extra large. And you have a sponsor that gives you 50 t-shirts per size. How can you limit that, or how can you make sure that there's only 50 people registering using the same shirt size? Unfortunately, that does not work dynamically. So you cannot have a contingency somewhere set, and then once the option is taken, it will take that out of the selection values. So that's why we use a validation rule here. And in the validation rule, we use a dcount that actually counts how often a participant in the database has the same value for t-shirt as I have here. So that actually counts how many t-shirts, for example, in extra large, are in the database already. And that needs to be smaller than event.shirt contingency. And that's an event attribute that I set up here. We looked at the event attributes last week. It is on the main window, basic settings, user-defined attributes. And I, for this example, said the shirt contingency is 6. So we are allowed to have 6 extra large t-shirts in our database, but not 7. And for now, to show you how many t-shirts in extra large we have, I will use the search. And hopefully that's something new to at least a few of you. So you can easily search and filter also by a formula in the search bar. So I search for t-shirt equals extra large. And I see 6 participants have taken a t-shirt in extra large already. So that means the validation is not met. So 6, smaller 6 is not true. And the validation rule needs to be true in order to allow the participant to continue with his registration. So let's see if that works. Let's say event shirt, extra large. Okay, I select the club first. And then I see, okay, the shirt size is no longer available. We're sorry. If I, however, use S, small, it goes through fine. And now that I have been told that extra large is taken, I can then adapt my deviating selection values and take that out of the selection values. So no one else can actually select extra large and then see, shit, that's already taken. And I will also show this note, unfortunately, all shirts in size extra large are taken. Let's refresh. And now we see, okay, this note, this wasn't there before, and the event shirt, you can only use choose small, medium, and large. And a validation rule that actually doesn't need to be set in the field that should be validated. So I could have this validation rule anywhere in my form fields. But that, if you have that, for example, in the very first line, then the error message would show in the very first line. So the error message always shows in the line that you apply the validation rule to. And of course, you can have different validation rules depending on your requirements. You could also, for example, check that the length of the license number is correct. So that length of license equals 6. And if someone wants to enter license with 7 digits, then he will receive the validation error message. I hope that got clear to everyone how to use the validation rule. Because then we can proceed with the special functions. So these are only some of the special functions that can be used for form fields. So this is not the full list. Some of them are self-explanatory. Some are so specific that we don't want to cover them right now. But I will have an example for all of those that are shown here. Let's start with the time, date, or year entry. And actually, the time entry we will save for the online self-service. We'll save that example for later. But we will have a look at the date or year entry. And that's where we go into the marathon relay. Marathon relay, as I told you, is one participant with the information of the second and the third runner in set up as additional fields. And here we have the year of birth for the second runner. Actually, this is German. I forgot to translate it to English. My bad. And here I have a drop down of different years up to 2021. Or I have the date of birth here with date, month, and the year. How do I set that up? I'll have second underscore name, which I will use second underscore year of birth for the year of the second runner. And I chose the special function year of birth. I can also choose to show accepted years of birth only. And then depending on the contest that the participant registers for, it will look which participants are eligible in that race. And then it will only show the accepted years of the birth only. And similar to this, the date entry can be used for example, the date of birth. You could also use it in a virtual race to ask when did you do your race. So this could be a date entry or a date entry that only shows accepted years of birth only as well. Then the next special function that I want to look at is the group registration count. So all the way at the bottom, I have a few additional fields set up. So let's start with the group registration count. Group registration count, what does that do? It uses the special function group registration count. And that's basically all I need to say. It counts how many participants register in the same group registration. Why do I need it? Sometimes you want to apply a voucher if you have 10 or more, if you have 5 or more registrations, and that's the only way how to realize that. And then in your entry fee settings, you could apply a voucher, a group registration minus 10% if the value of the group registration count field is larger or equal to 5. The next field I want to look at is the max value plus 1. And I use the example of the invoice number. The invoice number uses the special function max value plus 1 or max value plus 1 per contest. And with this special function, the software will look at this field, the invoice number field, and searches the highest value and then adds 1 for the new participant. So that's why you could, for example, use it for an invoice number, because that always needs to be continuous yeah, should always count up by 1. Then we have different options for drop downs, for example. Let's look at the club. We want to look at this club field. So here I have no special function right now. And so my club, I want to go to the single registration. My club is simply a text field. Now with the club, I want to apply the special function select value. With a select value, I can select a value that is being used for that field. So now it will check for all participants in the database what club names they have, and then I can select one of their clubs. But I cannot add a new club. So maybe club is not the best example for this special function. Or I could also say there's a better function for the club, which is propose value. Because of course you want to have good data. You want to have, you don't want to change so much data in the aftermath. So everyone has the exact same club name if you want to use it for a team score, for example. And that's where you can use the propose value. The propose value lets you choose from a list, but you can also enter your own club name. And if you enter something, I will search for, yeah, I simply enter HA, and then it will filter the selection options to those clubs that contain this. So that way, if I want to register for the club, I know this is our, then I could simply tick that option. And I know that my club is spelled exactly the same as for my colleague, for example. Then we look at the bottom again. There is a special function called calculation after saving. We will use this for the field is online registration. So we want to know if someone registered through the online registration. This is only an example, not sure if that will happen from time to time, but of course, the idea behind it is the same for everything, for every other field as well. So here we have the is online reg, and with the calculation after saving means as soon as the registration has been completed. So after saving, the field, the checkbox field is online reg will be set to 1. So that's it. That way you can manipulate your data automatically, but you also need to be cautious with it because there's no way to retrieve the actual data, because it will be saved right away as this, and even in the participant history, you will not see what it has been before. But there's also the option to calculate before saving. And here I want to use it for a participant counter. So I, for every single participant, want to know when he registered, or to put it in different words, how many participants have registered before you. So I say calculation before saving. That means before the participant is actually created in, or created into the database, written into the database. I will check the D count. So I count how many participants are in the same contest as myself, and then I add 1. So if there's 5 participants already registered for that event, I am number 6. Why do I use this option compared to the highest or maximum value plus 1? The reason is simple, or the answer is simple. With the calculation before saving, with at least with this expression, imagine you have a group registration of 5 participants, and they're the very first ones to register for a contest. So they will receive invoice number 1. And there's 5 participants in that contest. So now you are the 6th to register for the event or for the contest. And your invoice number would be 2, because everyone from the group registration has the invoice number 1, and it uses maximum value plus 1. But for the participant counter, you want to know how many participants are registered for that event. So here you would be number 6. So that's the difference. Another special function is the language special function. As you may have noticed, there are quite a few languages available on myresult.com, or also for an embed. And the language, the special function language, will simply save the language code through which the participant registered on my.result.com. You can make use of that if you send emails later on, and if you have a multilingual registration site, or if you have someone speaking that language, it's easier to contact them in their mother language. The last special function I want to show you is the wish BIP number. So with the preferred BIP number, I ask if someone wants to buy his or her own BIP number, or select his BIP number. And then I have the field BIP that I will only show if pref BIP equals 1. And here I have the select wish BIP number or the enter wish BIP number. The select wish BIP number will open a dropdown, and the participant can select the wish BIP number. But it is important to know that this will only work if you have set up BIP number ranges. So for the marathon, this would work now, and then we can select a BIP number from 1 through 20 that is not taken already. So let's see if that works. First, I need to select the contest. Let's take the contest marathon. I want to choose my BIP number for €2. And now I have the drop down with the BIPs. If you have BIP number ranges, let's say with 100 or more free BIPs, please avoid using the select wish BIP number, because the browser needs to load all options. And that can take a while, and that can cause the browser to crash. I'm not sure if a participant will then come back and select his wish bib number, which does not work again. So that's why we have the enter wish bib number, and this is simply a open text field. And now I can enter a bib, let's say 250. And once I want to proceed, then it will tell me, okay, there's too many people in there. So then, okay, the 250 is available. And let's try with bib number 1. I click out of the box, and then it tells me bib number already in use. There was one question in the chat that Ulisse already answered, but I wanted to show it to you as well. For the club, especially for the club, there is the option to enter a list of clubs as proposal. And here you can import club names separated by semicolon, as Ulisse pointed out. And then participants can select this club or this, the club they want to register for. But it should also work here to enter or import all selection options in here if you don't have a full database with all possible options already. So now we're done with the form fields. Now you should know everything that you need to set up your online registration. So we can look at the email confirmation. The email confirmation is pretty straightforward. There's not so many different things that you can set. Send your email, send a name, quite obvious. The subject as an expression as well. And then we have the confirmation for a single registration, which is also pretty straightforward. So this is always the same email for everyone who registers through a single registration. But when looking at a group registration, it is a bit different. So we have a text header as an expression, and that text header will be shown once at the very beginning of the email. Then we can have a text for each registration. So that will be repeated for every registration. So if you have a group registration with 5 participants, this text will be repeated 5 times for every single participant. Of course, the last name, first name, or the data fields will be filled for first, then for the second, and for the third participant. And then at the very end, you have the mail footer again, which is only entered once. For the attachments, it's only necessary to know that you need to include the file ending in the attachment name. And that gives us 15 minutes for the online self-service and specialties. Well, there's one more question. If the age, for example, is below 18 and you need to show a guardian field, for example, that is easily possible. And especially here, it is very important that you check if you ask for the year of birth or the date of birth. So if you ask for the year of birth, okay, now we want to simply to make that clear, show, let's simply call it guardian field. It's easy and you will understand what it's all about. The guardian field should only show if age is under 18. This will not work. Why? Because we want to compare the age, but we don't ask for the age. So if I want to limit it by age, then I also need to ask for the age. But still, it's possible. So we have the year of birth. So I could say year of birth smaller than 2003, for example. Now, if I go into the file, I have the guardian field because that's empty. If it's 2003, it will not show. If it's under 2003, okay, then I need to change that. And then it should work. Or you say larger, larger. And okay, no, it doesn't, larger 2002 in this case, as we ask for the year of birth. If you ask for the date of birth, let's change it to date of birth. The format is important. So if you ask for the date of birth, you put a hash, and then you can say, okay, for anyone who's younger, so the date of birth is larger than, let's say, year, month, day. Everyone who is born after 1st of April 2003, it should show the Guardian field. So now we don't see any Guardian field here. Date of birth, 1st of January 2002. Okay, I need to change the operator again. That's where I struggle, but it's good that it's recorded here. So you also see that it's not only you struggling sometimes. 1st of January 2002. He's over 18, so no Guardian field necessary. Okay, then once it has been hidden, then it will not pop up again. So then I would say date of birth smaller and date of birth larger. Then, yeah, you need to play around a bit, but that's actually important that you have the same field here as in your form fields, and then you need to play around a bit with the operator. And if you have the date of birth, the date format matters. I hope that answered your question. So now let's look at the online self-service. What is the online self-service? The online self-service basically lets customers change data on their own. So you don't need to answer emails asking for fixing a typo in the name or the club. You can let the customer do that. The online self-service is the same as the online registration, but you don't have a landing page. So basically you click on a link that you can add to the email confirmation. You click on the change link, how we call it, and then you will land directly in the form fields with fields pre-filled. There's some more options on the mandatory options, and there's one important variation to the show if check compared to the online registration. And then I also want to show you how to convert a group registration into a single registration. So the online self-service, you will find it further down here. The basic settings, they are actually the same as the online registration basic settings from the layout, but only there's no landing page options. The rest is almost exactly the same. The email confirmation is exactly the same. And then we look at the form fields. First of all, you can copy form fields from the online registration. We don't want to do that right now because I have prepared something here. So we have a contest, club, bib, last name, first name, year of birth, gender. Now we have all of that non-editable except for the club. So this is one difference to the online registration. We can have a field mandatory if filled or non-editable. Non-editable means that, of course, it is shown, but you cannot change data. Mandatory if filled means if there was something in that field. So if you entered a club, for example, and you say mandatory if filled, then you cannot delete the club name. Of course, for club, that doesn't really make sense, but there's sometimes it makes sense, for example, with gimmicks, for example. So this is not mandatory. The common in group registration show fields that really doesn't change. So what else did I set up? I have a virtual time that is not mandatory. And you'll also see a virtual time that is non-editable. Why do I have it twice in here? So the virtual time, I only want to show if the virtual time is empty initially. So that is the difference, the initial value. And the initial value means when opening the online self-service, the state of when you opened it. So if I enter a time, and now we need to check this one. So this is how the online self-service may look like for my participant in this case. And now I can enter a virtual time. So now this is the initial state. Virtual time is empty, nothing in there. So if there's nothing in there, of course, I need to be able to put something in there. Then I have it non-editable when the time is unequal empty. So if there's something in that field initially, so when calling the online self-service, then it should be non-editable. And why is the initial value so important? So here we have an example text. And we will show if the virtual time is empty, but not the initial value. We will save that. So the virtual time is empty and is shown because show if initially empty. The example text is shown if virtual time is empty. So now we enter a virtual time. And now the example text is gone because the virtual time is no longer empty. But I still want, maybe I did something wrong here. So I still want to show the virtual time. Now I confirm my changes. I refresh. So now I call it again. And now my virtual time is no longer empty initially. And that's why I now show it non-editable. And that was it. When you have a group registration, but now you have a virtual race, you probably don't want everyone from the group registration to be able to enter the time for everyone else from that group registration. So you need to change that information. You need to change the group registration, convert it into a single registration. How does that work? You go to main window, adapt data, data manipulation, and here I pre-defined something. So you set the group ID to ID. So the group ID, the software checks if there is more than one participant with the same group ID. And if so, then it is a group registration. If there's only one participant with the same group ID, then it is a single registration. And it is important for a single registration that the group ID is the same as the ID. And then we have the group registration position that we want to set to 0, because in a group registration, you can't be on number 2. So that's 0. Now we change it for everyone that has a group registration position larger than 0. And now it is important to resend the change link if you have sent it before, because the change link will change, at least for those that have been group registration 2 or higher. And once we did that change, everyone will have this single registration layout. So that gives us 5 more minutes to talk about specialties. Not this kind of specialties, unfortunately, but website integration and the embed of an online self-service where the change link to a website, to your own website, to the website where you integrate the online registration. So this is the German result website, because in German we have a basic training once per quarter that is integrated into our website. So this is the registration form. You see it is all empty. This is the registration form. And how did we get that? So under myresult.com website integration, you will see 2 code snippets. The first one is for the seamless integration of the online registration form fields. Second one is for the integration with the whole info page. So all of this with the buttons. On our website, we used the first snippet, and that was it. You can add custom CSS here. You can add custom CSS in the basic settings to change the design slightly. You can have CSS on your website. So for example, for the body or for headers, if you define classes in your HTML tags in the form fields, they will of course be adapted. So now we have the registration on our website. You don't need to put people or forward people to myresult.com. You can keep them on your event website. But now you still want to have the change link, and the change link should not be on myresult.com as we used to have here. But the change link should also be on your event website. And that is possible because what matters here is this part of the URL. So this is the same. So if I simply call this, then I will be here. Okay, this is the German page, but doesn't matter. But if I add this to the end of the URL, then I will be here in my online self-service based on a change ID and a change key. With our example for our basic training, this is the registration form on our website. See, result.com. This is the online self-service on myresult.com. And this is our website with the online self-service integrated. So how does it work? We are on the same URL as before, but we only append it by this, the change ID and the change key. That is part of the change link. And to automate that, under main window, participants data, user-defined fields and functions, we created a change link to field. We will look at the user-defined fields and functions, or fields, functions, expressions, all that next week. So this is quite a good link to it. Here we use the replace function. So in the change link, we replace my.result.com/event ID/registration. What we see, oh no, it's not what we see here, but that's what we have. Oops. Here. That's where we are. And we want to change all this by our event website and the URL, the exact URL where we host the online registration of this event. And it will only work with this event. So if I copy this one, so this is, in this case, it will not work with the online training event setup file. So it works because this is a different file. And if I would want to, if I simply copy the change ID and a change key of this change link, which is part of our event setup file, and amend it to the basic training website here, then you will see that there is a change key invalid. So it will only work if you have the exact same URL where you have your event registration, and then it will work. And that way you can forward your participants to your website to change their data there and use the online self-service. And that was everything I had to say about the online registration, the online self-service. It took me 91 minutes now. I hope that's still fine for you. And if there's no more questions, all I can say is thanks for your time. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something out of the session. And I hope you will tune in next week when I will tell you more about expressions, user-defined fields, functions, or functions in general, fields in general. Stay safe, stay healthy, make the best of the time, and talk to you next week. If you have a question in the meantime, please don't hesitate to contact us on support@result.com. All right, have a good day, have a good night, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.